My name is Althea Quinn. I was standing near the back of the wedding hall, barely visible in the sea of silk gowns and designer tuxedos. I wasn't there for the ceremony. I wasn't there for sentiment. I was there to see how far silence could echo. It was my sister's big day, and I wasn't even listed on the program. The place card at my table had my name misspelled. Alicia Quim. A typo that said everything about how much they cared. Alyssa had always been the golden child, the charming one, the one who made family photo albums while I quietly disappeared from the frame. The first time I laid eyes on Franklin Hale, her new father-in-law, he looked straight through me. Didn't shake my hand. Didn't ask a question. His eyes skimmed over me like I was a server who'd wandered too close. To him, I was no one worth noticing. Until the moment came. The MC raised his glass and smiled toward the center table. And now, a special thank you to the strategic partner whose investment made this merger and this wedding possible. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Althea Quinn. Franklin Hale turned. His face drained of color. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just looked him in the eye and said, "You missed your handshake earlier." Growing up, I learned early that love in our house came with conditions. Our parents weren't cruel. They just measured affection by charm, not consistency. And Alyssa, my younger sister, had charm in abundance. She smiled on cue, told people what they wanted to hear, and turned every mistake into a performance worth clapping for. I was the quiet one, the one who read the fine print, who noticed when the checkbook didn't balance, who asked uncomfortable questions at the dinner table. They said I was difficult. I was 11 when I realized they had stopped expecting me to be part of the story. School awards, debate competitions, early college credits. I'd bring home certificates, and they'd be left on the kitchen counter beneath junk mail and expired coupons. Alyssa, meanwhile, got a cake for passing algebra. It didn't bother me at first. I figured I was just built different. But when I turned 17 and no one showed up to the scholarship dinner the school invited my parents to, that silence settled deep. I stopped inviting them after that. College was my way out, but I paid for it myself. Pell Grants, night shifts, tutoring spoiled freshmen who couldn't bother to read their syllabi. I didn't complain. I calculated. The last time I saw my family before the wedding was over a decade ago. Alyssa had just landed a marketing internship through some extended cousin's connection. At dinner, my mother had smiled sweetly and said, "Maybe you should try something like that, Althea. Something more realistic than international logistics. You're good with spreadsheets, aren't you?" I remember nodding and excusing myself early. I walked out into the cold and promised I would never again ask for a seat at a table I had to justify being at. They didn't chase me. They never did. People talk a lot about estrangement, like it's a one-time break. But in my case, it was a slow fade. I sent fewer birthday cards. They stopped inviting me to Thanksgiving. Alyssa moved up. PR assistant, then coordinator, then some flashy title at a startup. I watched it all through LinkedIn and email forwards from bored college friends. She was always front and center. I was always not. They didn't ask what I was doing, and I didn't offer. It was cleaner that way. But I never stopped building. While Alyssa crafted social posts about Office Bagel Fridays, I was learning how to reroute a failing shipping line through the Panama Canal during a labor strike. I learned how to negotiate fuel contracts during volatile markets. I learned how to turn bankrupt shipping startups into profitable mid-sized companies in under 2 years. No one in my family knew that by the time I was 35, I had founded Marin Ventures, or that I had offices in Boston, Singapore, and Rotterdam, or that my firm had recently acquired a 48% controlling interest in Hale Marine, the very company Franklin Hale had spent 2 decades building. They didn't ask, and I didn't tell. They thought I had vanished. But I hadn't gone anywhere. I had just stopped answering to people who never really saw me in the first place. No one ever asked me how I survived after leaving home. No one asked where I lived, who helped me, or if I ever got sick alone. That's the thing about being invisible in your own family. You learn to stop expecting questions and start building answers. I moved to Baltimore after college. Not glamorous, but close to the port. That mattered. I took a job with a shipping logistics company where the hours were brutal and the bosses didn't remember your name unless something went wrong. It was perfect because I didn't need praise. I needed information. I spent 2 years at the bottom rung: manifest processing, tracking codes, warehouse rotation, field inventory audits in weather that peeled your skin raw. And I took notes. Always. On systems, inefficiencies, union interactions, client loopholes. I watched how money moved in silence and how companies bled value because no one wanted to question the process. That's when I saw it. The flaw in scale. Big shipping lines thought bigger was better. Bigger vessels, bigger ports, more control. But it made them clumsy, vulnerable. So I took everything I learned, drained every cent I had, and started Marin Ventures out of a rented one-bedroom apartment in a building that smelled like bleach and roaches. My first client was a desperate small operator out of Nova Scotia who'd just lost a major contract after an ice season delay. I rebuilt his routing system using data from weather models and optimized turnaround times. He tripled capacity in 9 months. He told 2 friends, and they told 2 more. By 32, I had 5 clients. By 36, I had 2 offices and was quietly acquiring distressed logistics companies that the giants had written off as unsalvageable. The turning point was Kelston Freight, a family-owned company with mismanaged cash flow, but an exceptional South American cargo lane. I bought them out quietly, cleaned the books, retained their local talent, and funneled all data through proprietary routing software I designed with a coder friend from grad school. That caught attention. Hale Marine was one of the companies watching. They didn't know it was me, of course. I worked through shell corporations, offshore trusts, clean legal firewalls. By the time Hale entered negotiations to expand their Atlantic footprint, they didn't realize their new strategic capital partner was Marin Ventures, the firm now holding indirect controlling interest in 3 of their auxiliary subsidiaries. It was beautiful, because it meant I didn't have to beg for recognition. I could buy the table, quietly. Still, I never planned on crossing paths with Alyssa again. I assumed she'd marry someone sleek and soulless from a glossy Manhattan world, and that would be the end of it. But then the Hale name came across my desk. I stared at the due diligence file for a long time the first time I saw it. Alyssa's face was in a company press release from their gala. Standing beside Franklin Hale, beaming. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel anything. It was just math. Of course it would be her. Of course she'd find her way into a world that looked clean and powerful on the surface. That's where charm lives. When the wedding invitation arrived, weeks after the RSVP deadline, addressed to Miss Althea Quinn, I almost didn't go. But then I remembered something from that dinner table all those years ago. "You're good with spreadsheets, aren't you?" Yes, I was. And I had the ownership charts to prove it, so I had my assistant book the flight. I would attend, not as a guest, but as a reminder. The envelope was creased when it arrived. No return address. The cardstock was heavy, embossed with gold foil, as if weight could compensate for sincerity. My name was wrong. Althea Quinn. But I recognized Alyssa's looping signature in the bottom corner of the RSVP insert. There was no personal note, no phone call, just a formality sent too late and printed too carelessly. I still chose to go. I wore a tailored black suit, subtle, precise, unmistakably out of place among the pastel chiffon and glittering heels that flooded the Hale estate. I arrived precisely 10 minutes before the ceremony, long after the family photos had wrapped, and early enough to watch them avoid looking at me. Alyssa spotted me during the cocktail hour. Her smile tightened. "Althea," she said with the forced warmth of someone greeting a dentist. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "You invited me," I said simply. Her eyes flicked to my suit, then away. "Right, you look professional." "I am." She didn't introduce me to her fiancé, nor to the guests clumped around them like satellites. I was steered toward the edge of the lawn, to a table marked Overflow. I found my place card, Althea Quinn, next to someone's elderly cousin, who asked if I was in catering. I told him no. During dinner, I ate in silence. I watched Franklin Hale command the room. He was a man who liked the sound of his own voice, booming, decisive, built for boardrooms and declarations. He moved with the kind of confidence that only ever grows in men who have never been told no by someone who mattered. When he made his way past my table, Alyssa trailed behind him. She paused, gesturing vaguely. "This is my sister, Althea." He glanced my way, barely stopping. "Ah, one of the logistics people?" Alyssa snorted before she could catch herself. "Well, not really. She used to do something in transport, I think." Franklin gave a polite, dismissive smile. "Important work. Somebody's got to keep the packages moving." I nodded, matching his smile. "Somebody does." He didn't ask what I did, or who I was, or how I was connected to the family business. He didn't shake my hand. Instead, he patted Alyssa's shoulder and turned toward another cluster of men in navy suits and loud watches. They didn't see me. That had always been the point. But what they didn't realize, what none of them could possibly know, was that I'd already seen the investor brief Franklin had presented just 3 days earlier. I'd read every line, including the ones that outlined the joint capital injections scheduled for Q3, partially funded by Marin Ventures. By me. My presence at this wedding wasn't symbolic. It was strategic. A quiet punctuation mark at the end of a long, deliberate sentence. When the MC took the mic, my wine glass was still half full. "And now," he said brightly, "a word of thanks to the individual whose vision and resources helped bring this remarkable union, both personal and professional, into reality." Forks paused mid-air. "Please join me in welcoming the founder of Marin Ventures, Miss Althea Quinn." There was a beat of silence, a collective inhale. I stood, adjusted my cuff once, and walked slowly toward the platform. Behind me, I heard it. The distinct, fragile sound of a crystal glass slipping from someone's hand and shattering against stone. I didn't need to look. I already knew who dropped it. I didn't rush. Let them sit in it. The clatter of the glass hadn't finished echoing across the stone floor when I reached the edge of the stage. Franklin Hale stood frozen, his eyes wide, jaw slack. A server moved swiftly to clean the spill at his feet, but he didn't move to help, didn't even blink. He was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. I gave the MC a polite nod. He stepped aside instantly, one of those men who could smell power midair and vacate accordingly. I didn't take the microphone. I didn't need to speak. I let the silence work. In front of me sat the entire Hale family, the company board, their private investors, Alyssa's new in-laws, all dressed like royalty, now shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. I saw Ruby, the Hale matriarch, give her husband a sharp look, as if trying to determine what on earth was going on and whether it could be spun into something acceptable. To her right, Alyssa sat with her new husband. She hadn't stood up. Her hands were folded in her lap, clutching her napkin like it might stop her fingers from trembling. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I stayed still just long enough for the weight of my name to settle properly into the room. It didn't take long. In corporate spaces, Marin Ventures was known. Quietly, yes, but known. We didn't do press releases. We didn't sponsor golf tournaments or splash our logos on shipping containers. But we had a reputation, ruthlessly precise, surgical in how we acquired and repositioned struggling logistics chains into efficient, profit-driving assets. The kind of reputation that made certain men sweat through their collars when they realized they hadn't read the fine print on their own cap tables. I saw it happen in real time. Franklin Hale's lips moved slowly as he processed it. Quinn, Marin, Althea. He mouthed the pieces like they were foreign words. And then I saw something crack in his expression. Not panic, not yet, but the dawning of a realization. He'd dismissed the wrong woman, not just at dinner, not just at the wedding, but in boardrooms, in shareholder memos, in private strategy calls, where he'd referred to my firm as the silent capital. I'd been silent, not invisible. I stepped back from the stage without a word and returned to my seat. The guests clapped, hesitantly, then more confidently, unsure if this was an announcement or a warning. Franklin remained standing. Ruby tugged at his arm, trying to pull him down discreetly. He didn't sit. He looked at me the entire way back to my table, And now he moved. He left the head table and approached mine, that corporate grin already stretching across his face like a patch too small to cover the hole underneath. "Miss Quinn," he said, voice a little too high, a little too smooth. "I had no idea you'd be joining us tonight." I raised my glass slightly, not in toast, but acknowledgement. It was a last-minute decision. "Ah, well, we're thrilled you came. Thrilled!" He looked around as if someone might save him from the growing tension. No one did. He cleared his throat. "We're grateful for your partnership, deeply grateful. The recent expansion, well, it wouldn't have been possible without Marin Ventures. And to think, family too. That's just the cherry on top." I tilted my head. "Is that what I am now? Family?" He smiled, but it wavered. "Of course." I didn't blink. "Funny. That's not what I felt earlier when you mistook me for a freight clerk." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Alyssa appeared beside him. She looked pale, the kind of pale that isn't just embarrassment, but exposure. "Althea," she said carefully. "I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" I asked. She swallowed. "That you were... Marin, that you had... built something like this." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "You didn't ask." She looked down. I leaned back in my chair. "Don't worry, Alyssa. You've built a lovely life. I'm not here to interrupt it." Franklin cleared his throat again. "We should, perhaps, find time to discuss future opportunities. I think there's a lot we could align on." I looked at him the way you look at someone who just realized their roof has been leaking for years. "I'll have my legal team schedule a review," I said, "but I suggest you read your own shareholder structure first. The alignment may not be where you think it is." And just like that, the corporate mask slipped. Not all the way off, but enough to see the fear hiding underneath. They weren't just embarrassed, they were exposed. I excused myself before dessert. The music resumed, forced and brittle. Laughter tried to return to the room, but tripped over its own awkwardness. I walked out through the main entrance alone, not looking back, because I had nothing left to prove. I didn't slip out quietly. I walked straight through the grand entrance, the same way I'd come in. Unnoticed then, unforgettable now. The music had returned, brittle and misplaced, clinging to corners of the room that still hadn't recovered from the silence I'd left behind. Some guests glanced at me as I passed, their expressions caught between curiosity and discomfort. They didn't know what they'd just witnessed, but they knew it mattered, and that was enough. Outside, the night air was crisp. The wind carried the scent of the bay, salt, oil, steel. The Hale shipping empire glittered faintly in the distance, docks lined with containers, like neat lies stacked on top of one another. I'd studied those docks. I'd audited their contracts. I knew how far beneath the surface the rot had spread. They didn't. But they would. A black sedan waited by the curb. James, my driver, opened the door without a word. He knew better than to ask. This wasn't a night for conversation. As I slid into the back seat, I caught one last glimpse of the estate through the tinted window. I half expected Alyssa to come running out, maybe to apologize, maybe to spin something sentimental. But no one followed, not her, not Franklin, not a single soul, because now they didn't know what to say. How do you speak to someone you spent years pretending didn't exist? How do you face a name you tried to forget, once it controls your future? The truth is, I didn't come here to be forgiven. I didn't come here to ruin a wedding. I came because they needed to know, finally, undeniably, what they missed. They hadn't just overlooked me. They had miscalculated me. And people like Franklin Hale, they don't recover well from miscalculations. Alyssa would go on with her marriage, with her polished photos and her new last name. Franklin would likely try to renegotiate terms in the boardroom, reassert control. But it was too late. The shares were signed, the influence set. Marin Ventures wasn't at the table. We owned the table, and they'd read that name, my name, on every report, every proposal, every decision moving forward. Not because I forced them to, because they signed the papers before they ever thought to ask who held the pen. I didn't need applause. I didn't need recognition. Just a clean exit, and the echo of my name behind me.